Welcome back to another edition of the Talking Hedge. I'm Josh Kincaid, and this is a business cannabis podcast where we talk about everything that is business and cannabis. So jumping right into a BDS Analytics report for trending in 2019, top 10 things, starting with declining prices. The prices for most cannabis products keep inching down for a variety of reasons. One of them, price remains the number one driver for consumer price product choices. I've seen that in every single store I go to. A lot of these bud tenders, the number one thing they're asked is what's the cheapest flower or oil, the highest THC content. So if you're going to filter anything, it's going to be price relative to THC ratios. The report goes on to say that the average price for Oregon flower has declined from $9 a gram in January 2016 to a little over $4 a gram November 2018. That's retail. Wholesale prices are as low as 8 cents a gram for B-grade bud. So prices are definitely hitting the floor. We're seeing that, and it's all categories: flower and concentrate, edibles, topicals. They've all declined in Colorado, although none of the drops compare to flower. Concentrates, for example, fell a mere 20% between the same time frame. So the price dip scenario was reversed in California, as we see in all new markets. So that's same thing with Nevada. But edible prices averaged $14 in March of 2017 and then rose to $20 in November of 18. So the proverbial supply and demand pricing dynamics kicked in, but it's also just a matter of new states and countries. I mean, look at Canada, they're all balking at the lack of supply there. So all standard stuff. Number 9, a refocus on the core. Even with the influx of so many new and exciting customers flooding the market, companies, including brands and retailers, that place a reinvigorating focus on their core customers will flourish. So understanding who your core customers are is key, and that most certainly includes discerning customers. Those cannabis enthusiasts who have experimented with the industry's manifold products and who understand at least some basics about cannabis science. While mainstream customers will continue to grow, successful companies must still focus their marketing, merchandising, and/or product development efforts on their core. Collectively, this group often guides trends. What the discerning customer likes today, the mass market might embrace in 6 months. So discerning customers are influencers, early adopters, and lead indicators. They spend more on quality, keep up with technology, care that products are locally grown or manufactured, and prefer local, natural, organic, and socially interested brands. They care about things like processing methods, terpenes, additional cannabinoids, growing methods, and packaging. And I'll say that the 1-to-1 CBD to THC ratio is going to be the next big thing. I kind of feel like that's the new blue dream, if you will, so I'm on record. Growth in consistent, low-dose, dialed-in products, which before I even go into it is completely opposite of focus to the core. Discerning customers are going to be people who can handle 100 milligrams, not 10 milligrams, although I do like to have low dose vape. So that microdosing is going to be key. It's a completely different segment. So let me get into this. There's plenty of people that just wing it when enjoying cannabis, but increasingly more cannabis consumers care deeply about consistent dosing and being able to carefully control the nature of their experience. 33% of edible consumers prefer low-dose products, defined as products containing less than 10 milligrams of THC per serving. 40% of edibles consumers have chosen high CBD products, and of these, about a third prefer that there's low THC and high CBD ratios. Among consumers, a third say merchandisers need to do a better job, manufacturers need to do a better job with crafting consistent doses. And 41% they say they wish more products were labeled with the desired manufactured effect, such as relaxation or energy. So consistency is still an issue, I guess, more so to the standpoint of what is it going to do to me. And there's a lot of people who won't jump into cannabis because there isn't that set of expectation yet. So, and that's consistently knowing what to expect. Number 7, convenience is key. Elaborate dab rigs, complete with large glass vessels, nails, and blowtorches are fan favorites for some, but current trends suggest that popularity is capped. The reason? Convenience is winning the day in the cannabis marketplace. The masses crave convenience when buying as well as consuming. The triumph of convenience is especially true among people who are new to the cannabis industry altogether. Location is convenient. It's a top consideration for when consumers shop. 67% of dispensary shoppers are identified as buyers. Half of cannabis consumers say they're largely influenced by convenience in the consumption form when choosing a product, qualifying as a top 5 decision. Number 6, brands further solidify. The days of bulk bud and plastic vials fully dominating the cannabis marketplace are over, and every other category outside of flower, edibles, concentrates, and topical brands far and away lead sales. Brands are building loyalty fan bases and product quality products that deliver on promising physio and psycho effects that are excelling. In Colorado, branded products make up 96% of the edibles market. Brands are building upon their gains. During the first quarter of 2015 in Colorado, the leading edible brand captured 12% of sales, with competitors close behind. But by the third quarter of 2018, the leading brand captured 23% of sales, and competitors drifted further behind. The battle of the brands is fierce in Colorado among concentrate companies. During the third quarter of 2015, the top 5 brands controlled 61% of sales, but by the end of the third quarter of 2018, sales among the top 5 accounted for only 35%. Others are coming on strong, and brand awareness of fighter brands increase. Said in the past that brands don't matter, sales do. I believe that 2019 is the year of brands. Right now, there's going to be too much consolidation and capitulation of companies where branding is going to be big. So you're going to have to obviously make sales, but you're going to need to have a brand exposure in order to survive. There's going to be too much when the economy tips. If you don't have the margins, you're not going to succeed. You're not going to be around. So you're going to have the sales. You have to have the branding. You have to have the cash flow. Otherwise, you're going to be out. CBD, CBD, CBD. The cannabis universe extends beyond dispensary doors, thanks to mounting interest in the cannabinoids like CBD, which are compounds found in cannabis as well as its sister plant, hemp. Unlike THC, which is also a cannabinoid, cannabis is not psychoactive, and CBD products for sale on grocery store shelves are derived from hemp rather than cannabis. Products containing CBD are increasingly popular across the country, popping up in new packaged good categories, or at least being discussed as possible additives almost on a weekly basis. Most cannabis products are inhaled through smoking or vaping, but with CBD, leading delivery vehicles are ingestibles, edibles, with 53% of sales, and topicals are 24%. Consumer education is paramount. In the United States, 69% of people say either there's no difference between the effects of CBD and THC or they don't know the answer. There's a lot of CBD companies popping up with the approval of the Farm Bill, but without enough sufficient capital, these companies aren't going to survive. They're going to need more than just branding and sales techniques. They're going to need a team of successful people behind them, and it's just going to be a lot of wasted money, in my opinion. They're not going to survive. Rec or med doesn't matter anymore. Where both markets coexist, medical dispensaries are generally on the decline, where adult use shops are booming. So people aren't using cannabis for medical reasons anymore, right? No. The decline of medical dispensaries has nothing to do with the reasons people consume cannabis. Instead, it has more to do with business models. As more our varied products become available, along with an increase in education and further destigmatization of cannabis consumption, an even larger percentage of consumers will imbibe in both fun and for medical purposes. Fewer people, in other words, will be self-identified solely as patients and desire medical-only shops, otherwise known as the rationalization convergence of the rec-med cannabis consumer. So almost 2/3 of the people in the U.S. already believe that marijuana has medicinal benefits. And in states that already offer adult use of medical sales, 88% endorse cannabis for medical purposes. Relatively few consumers use cannabis for single purposes, even among people who use cannabis for pain management. And almost 3/4 agree that they enjoy medical for recreation and social reasons. Medical markets continue to thrive in the absence of adult use markets. Arizona, for example, expanded from 22 million in 2017 to 56 million in 2018. It matters a lot. If you don't have medical cannabis, and you have states like Washington that don't test for pesticides, if you have stage 4 cancer, you have no option except black market. There's really no difference in Washington state between medical and rec, and that's a huge problem for people who have immune issues and can't handle the pesticides and the heavy metal content. Who knows what else is in it? So it really does matter. It's important. The aging consumer. Number 3, we no longer associate cannabis with use, which is not a mischaracterization. People in their 20s indeed do stand tall as active marijuana consumers, but so do older generations, including baby boomers, an important and growing segment. These baby boomers do not fit neatly in the box. 67% of boomers do not consume cannabis for health and medical reasons. Boomers are much more likely to identify pains, aches, and other medical problems as reasons for consuming. But nearly 60% also point towards unwinding and having a good time as reasons for consuming. Number 2 is the rise of beverages. Cheers to a sippable cannabis. With the rise of cannabis beverages markets, options abound. You have cold bottles of kombucha, tea bags, packaged shots of coffee, water-soluble powder mixes. The cannabis beverage marketplace now is in full from cannabis beer too, although pot-infused drinks like ales and chardonnays are alcohol-free. One especially fresh trend is the rise of CBD beverages, which can be sold outside of dispensaries. There are countless ways to consume cannabis, arguably none easier or more socially acceptable than simply sipping. So through November of 2018, beverages made up 5% of the annual U.S. edibles market with sales of $30 million, which I think is incredibly low. However, by 2022, the U.S. edibles market is projected to reach $3.4 billion and expand roughly tenfold to $374 million. So it's low. Cannabis beverage and sales grow. Some product categories within the edibles market will see their percentage of total edibles sales negatively impacted. Coffee isn't even a thing yet in a lot of these states. Like Twist, ready to go, drinkable coffee. Washington doesn't have any. So it will definitely lead into the rest of those edibles. And the number one trend, according to BDS Analytics for 2019, is the emergence of social consumption. We anticipate the emergence of legal cannabis social clubs in some markets in 2019. Research shows that a large population of cannabis fans will leap at the chance to imbibe at venues earmarked for legal cannabis consumption. Cannabis progressives like Las Vegas, San Francisco, and Denver will likely be the first to set up fostering cannabis experiences the rest of the country will observe and with immense interest. Almost 2/3 of cannabis consumers say they will engage with the plant for social and or recreational purposes. About 1/3 specifically consume prior to meeting with others. 41% savor cannabis for date nights as well as daytime fun. There are 5 key innovations driving the future of cannabis. 1, agricultural technology like lighting and tissue culture. 2, medical cannabis with vaporizers and oils and tinctures. 3, consumer products with nanotechnology and topicals. 4, payment processing, since you don't have banking. And 5, data and analytics, tracking software and retail analytics. Many companies are exploring business intelligence tools aimed at simplifying the complex cannabis industry. Technology innovation is helping seize the cannabis opportunity with an abundance of available prospects. There's no shortage of ways for investors to be involved in the nascent cannabis market. You don't even have to be human to get involved. Artificial intelligence is already here and changing how we use and understand cannabis. Artificial intelligence is poised to change the way you interact with the world, and that includes the world of cannabis. AI, or computing systems that mimic human intelligence, is being applied in every form of growing operations to devices that you roll, including joints. AI is here to help you roll. AI is already finding its way into cannabis-related hardware in the form of smart grinding. The Auto is a one-button machine that uses sensors and algorithms to determine the conditions of cannabis, whether it's super sticky, dry, full of seeds and stems, and it automatically adjusts how it grinds the plant to produce evenly processed cannabis. It then automatically loads it into a pre-rolled cone. The World Health Organization recommends reclassifying marijuana under international treaties. Global health experts at the United Nations are recommending that marijuana and its key component be formally rescheduled under international drug treaties. The World Health Organization is calling for the whole plant marijuana as well as cannabis resin to be removed from Schedule 4, the most restricted category of the 1961 Drug Convention, signed by countries from all around the world. The body also wants delta-9 tetrahydrocannabinol, or THC, and its isomers to be completely removed from a separate 1971 drug treaty and instead added to Schedule 1, the 1961 convention, according to a WHO document that has not yet been formally released, but was circulated by cannabis reform advocates. WHO is also moving to make clear that cannabidiol and CBD-focused preparations containing no more than 0.2% THC are not under international control at all. It had previously been the case that CBD wasn't scheduled under the international conventions, but the new recommendations to make that even more clear. The practical effects of the changes would be somewhat limited in that they wouldn't allow countries to legalize marijuana and still be in strict compliance with international treaties, but their political implications are hard to overstate. Taken together, recommendations, if adopted, would represent a formal recognition that the world's governing bodies have effectively been wrong about marijuana's harm and therapeutic benefits for decades. WHO's new position comes at a time when a growing number of countries are moving to reform their cannabis policies. As such, a shift in the UN could embolden additional nations to scale back or repeal their prohibition laws, even though legalization for non-medical or non-scientific reasons would still technically violate the global conventions. It's not clear how the US will vote. While the country has historically pressured other nations not to reform their own marijuana policies, the reality of legalizing in a growing number of US states has made that kind of pressure increasingly untenable in recent years. That's because the international community isn't just about US big pharma, big tobacco, big timber, synthetics like DuPont. There are countries that actually care about their people and want to provide a natural alternative. And if they're paying for that medicine, they're going to want to get it at the best price and grow it themselves. So it's pretty obvious to me, the shift in thinking. But the Trump administration moved last year to revoke Obama-era prosecutorial guidelines that generated a urge of non-intervention with local marijuana laws, but the president himself has voiced support for letting states set their own cannabis policies without interference. And Attorney General nominee William Burr said that during his confirmation hearing, he would not go after companies relying on the new rescinded cannabis guidance. So it remains to be seen how the administration will direct its UN representative when it comes down to weighing in on the proposed changes to the marijuana's status under international law. This Yahoo article says that the U.S. won't legalize marijuana in 2010, and here's why. There are three reasons that Yahoo claims there will be no change. One, Congress isn't currently friendly towards a reform. First, consider the current makeup of our government. Although Democrats recently won a major back in the House for the first time in 8 years, the Senate and presidency are still controlled by Republicans. That's meaningful for one reason. Republicans have historically had a more negative view on cannabis than people who identified as Democrats for independence. Two, marijuana isn't polarizing enough to make a difference. Even though support for marijuana has steadily improved over the past few decades, its relevance in Washington hasn't budged much. That means that marijuana doesn't have enough sway on Capitol to cause a dissenting politician from losing their elected seat in the House or Senate. That would have to change before there's any chance of cannabis reform at the federal level. And three, it's a money issue. Since marijuana is a Schedule I substance, businesses selling cannabis in the U.S. are subject to Section 280E of the U.S. tax code. The gist of this tax code is that it disallows businesses selling a federal illicit substance as defined by the Controlled Substances Act from taking normal corporate income tax deductions, save for the cost of goods sold. Unfortunately, cost of goods sold typically represents a small percentage of revenue. This exposes profitable cannabis companies to effective corporate tax rates that it could be as high as 90%. If cannabis was reformed at the federal level, either through a rescheduling or removal from the controlled substances list, it would no longer expose cannabis-based businesses to Section 280E. This would be excellent news for investors and the businesses themselves, but it would lead to less tax revenue at the federal level, an estimated $5 billion reduction over a 10-year period. Adding a federal excise tax may not be the answer either. California is already paying 45% in-state tax on retail cannabis sales, and pushing a federal excise tax on top of that could further drive consumers to the black market. So how do you invest in cannabis IPOs? The cannabis market has begun 2019 in a big rally following a horrible fourth quarter. So the global cannabis stock index managed by New Cannabis Ventures gained over 44% in January, having dropped over 44% in the fourth quarter. With a bullish tone in the market, many investors are looking for new issues, especially IPOs or initial public offerings, which are seeing the increasing frequency as the capital markets have opened to cannabis companies. Those looking to invest in newly listings should be aware that most of them are not IPOs, but rather reverse mergers or reverse takeovers, where the deals are taking place. So true IPOs represent the first time the stock has been offered to the public, while the reverse takeovers are a quicker way to go to public by merging into a company that's already been in its stock trading previously. In both cases, investors can sometimes buy into it before the stock begins trading, often getting a better price than where the stock commences trading after the IPO or reverse takeover. Most retailers won't be able to access stock in advance of its trading public because they aren't accredited investors who have a direct relationship with the Canadian investment bank. The decision to invest in an IPO or reverse takeover should be based upon a review of the business, the management team, the competitive landscape, and the valuation. But investors and traders should also be aware of the technical dynamics, like the size of the float, which is the amount of stock that can actually trade. Often IPOs will have a very limited number of shares relative to the amount issued that can trade initially. Tilray, for example, sold 10 million shares, and these were the only shares that could trade for the first 6 months, a favorable dynamic. Cannabis IPOs and reverse takeovers may offer investors strong returns if the cannabis market continues to rally. Reading prospectuses and filing statements, understanding the float, and avoiding overpaying after the stock begins trading are all essential to those buying new issues. More millennials own cannabis stock than Apple. Apparently, millennials who use the Robinhood free stock trading app have taken advice to heart, according to a Business Insider article. Shares of Aurora Cannabis, the Canadian cannabis producer, are now more popular among that app's mostly millennial users than Apple. Aurora Cannabis is now held by 247,000 Robinhood users, up more than 20,000 from last week. The marijuana stock outranked all others on the app, including Apple, which had maintained its top-ranked position since the week of November 8th. The smartphone giant stock now ranks second in terms of Robinhood ownership at 237,000 shares. Last month, Aurora told Business Intelligence that it's planning to introduce hemp-derived CBD products after the latest farm bill legalized hemp. The company is focused on expanding its reach in the U.S., where the regulatory environment is rapidly becoming more favorable for marijuana producers. This Canadian company got lucky after winning a lottery for Potash's old ticker symbol, POT. The Weekend Unlimited stock soars 90% after winning POT ticker symbol. The ticker symbol POT was so sought after in Canada, the exchange actually had to have a lottery in order to determine which company was going to win the symbol. And the victory goes to Weekend Unlimited, deemed to be the winner, and saw its shares soar as much as 90% in trading on Friday as a result. The company had been listed on the Canadian Stock Exchange since October 15th, 2 days before the country legalized recreational marijuana. And since nobody seems to have the attention span longer than the actual ticker, the company was previously trading under the ticker YOLO, the acronym You Only Live Once. Up until Friday, YOLO was down about 57% since its first day of trading, bringing its market cap to 28 million. As for the ticker POT, it was previously owned by Potash. When it became available in Canada about a week ago, 40 companies applied for it. U.S. cannabis spending is set to surge, with legal spending expected to hit $22 billion in 2022. After the descheduling of hemp in the U.S. with the Farm Bill, Canopy Growth said it'll spend $150 million to build its first production facility in the U.S., kicking off what is certain to be a wave of Canadian producers moving into the American hemp market. The real opportunity here is not hemp, but it's extract cannabidiol, better known as CBD. And even beyond that, it's really just a shoe-in in order to establish all of the resources we need in order to convert from CBD to THC in the eventuality that it becomes legal in the US. So it's obvious that the companies going to Canada to gain access to the marketplace, get the capital they need, establish brands, and then come back to the US in the legal form of hemp until it becomes legal, they're just going to dominate. All these companies are just going to be able to continue with their brand and their sales and then gobble up anybody else who has a unique niche product. But really, it's the beginning of the end for mom and pops unless they can diversify or differentiate or provide a unique experience, which is going to be bigger than anything else. Investors rarely get to witness the birth of an industry, said analyst John Zamparo. Such historic events include the gold rush, inventions of the automobile and aircraft, and the internet. Few companies live up to their lofty expectations. Only a handful of firms will come to dominate the global market. But Canopy and Kronos could be two of those top winners, largely because of the investment they've received from outside industries and shareholders. Global Standards Group adds 2 new categories for cannabis. An international standards organization has added 2 new specifications to assist in the processing and handling of marijuana. Because the industry is in its early stages, it lacks many established, commonly accepted standards, leaving businesses without clear guidelines and ground rules found in other industries. According to a news release, international standards have developed and soon to be published guidelines for cannabis packaging and labeling, covering products from sales to adult consumers, registered medical marijuana patients, and others, as well as disposing of raw material and product containing resin. Both standards were developed by the organization Cannabis Committee, formed in 2017. The standard creates a clear distinction between those parts of the cannabis plant that are controlled and those that are not provided under guidelines on how to dispose of the controlled parts of the plant in order to be compliant with international law. Cannabis firms are on the hunt with mergers and acquisitions beyond Canada, looking for international growth as markets begin to grow and opportunities begin to emerge. Obviously, coming back into the United States that has some of the strongest GDP, with states that exceed other countries' GDP, has huge opportunities. And so there's global cannabis industry M&As taking place with less frequent deals, but larger amounts of money involved. Canadian medical cannabis companies are increasingly looking at internationally for acquisitions to tap growth, while consolidation in the country's marijuana sector continues to steam ahead. Last year, there was 140 U.S. companies that were targets of mergers and acquisitions, which is a substantial increase over 2017's 86. We've seen an increase in M&A activity of Canadian companies. Cannabis firms in Canada raised a record 12 billion Canadian dollars in 2018, helping to fuel the recent acquisition binge. Beacon Securities analyst Russell Stanley expects more survival-type M&As rather than growth-related mergers and acquisitions in Canada. He said that the bigger players in Canada have what they want, what they need, and that the consolidation that they're going to see in Canada is among the small players who realize that they need additional scale in order to compete. In 2018, there were more deals involving cannabis companies outside Canada than within the country. A number of Canadian LPs have been working to establish beachheads in Germany, partly as a means of reaching the rest of Europe. Southeast Asia, with a number of markets that are taking a turn towards legalization, who have been approved to export cannabis to Canada with Clever Leaves. Colombian company Clever Leaves plans to export cannabis to Canada. A vertically integrated Colombian licensed producer of pharmaceutical-grade medical marijuana announced later today that it will become the first Colombian company authorized to export cannabis into Canada. This unprecedented move by Health Canada designates the first time a Colombian company is exporting native-grown cannabis legally into another country. According to the press release, Clever Leaves met all the requirements of Health Canada to obtain the imported permit. On January 29th, the Colombian National Narcotics Fund granted the approval necessary to export the cannabis from Colombia. Clever Leaves expects to begin exportation by mid-February. The initial shipment of Colombian cannabis is just for dried flower and is earmarked for testing purposes and will be transported directly to a Canadian lab. The ultimate end market is a medical market, which is required by Colombian regulations. The Chinese want some cannabis. They have delegations that are visiting Israel to explore medical cannabis opportunities. A Chinese delegation from business and research circles is planning to visit Israel in the coming days to explore opportunities in the medical cannabis sector. Cannabis for medical use remains illegal in China, but if the country's positions change, even just on CBD, it could open up significant business opportunities in the world's most populated country. The Chinese delegation will meet with representatives of pharmaceutical companies and technological innovators, according to an Israeli Business Daily newspaper. That would be huge. Other countries in Asia that have made recent breakthroughs include South Korea and Thailand. The global elitists have made their mark. Davos says that Europe could be the world's largest medical marijuana market in 5 years. So Europe's largest 3 medical cannabis markets could double in size in 2019, making this a transformative year by the European market, according to a new report by United Kingdom-based analytics firm Prohibition Partners. The European cannabis market's value skyrocketed last year with 500 million euros already invested in the market, which is mostly funneled into distribution and cultivation licenses. That could be just the tip of the iceberg, according to the report, as European countries combine to become the world's largest federally regulated medical market over the next 5 years. In the near term, Europeans' 3 largest medical cannabis markets, Italy, Netherlands, and Germany, will see patient counts more than double to a combined 225,000 this year. Over the next decade, the European Cannabis Report predicts the total market for cannabis could surpass 58 billion euros. Europe is seeing a fast-paced wave of regulation and legislative change. Throughout 2018, a swath of European countries introduced, reviewed, or announced future legislation to advance the legal cannabis agenda. The UK, Portugal, and Malta have all legalized medical cannabis products. The report breaks down commercial opportunities in production, processing, distribution, and retail. Other takeaways from the report include the serious access restriction that exists in the United Kingdom, despite doctors legally being able to prescribe medical cannabis since November 1st of 2018. 2019 could be a big year following the World Health Organization as it released its position on medical cannabis. MMJ is legal in 14 countries in Europe. Regulations are expected to evolve and improve patient access and allow business opportunities. Germany, Italy, and the Netherlands could see a medical cannabis market grow to 18 billion euros in the next decade. Molson Coors CBD beverage partner Hexo closes a Canadian $57 million share offering. So Hexo Corp, a licensed producer of cannabis based in Quebec, raised 57 million Canadian dollars on Wednesday when it closed its offering of common shares. Last August, Hexco entered a joint venture with Molson Coors Canada to produce CBD-infused beverages, in which the brewing giant took a 57% stake. Molson Coors said at the time it would have the option of buying 5% stake in Hexco if the company's stock hit $6 a share. Hexco stock was trading at $6.98 a share at midday Wednesday. Canada just legalized federally, nationally in November, but it's still no excuse to have the CBC reporting instances of cannabis poisoning on the rise. It's irresponsible. In serious cases, cannabis poisoning can necessitate a trip to the hospital. So the Quebec Poison Control Center says the number of reported cases of cannabis poisoning has more than tripled since the legalization of last fall. Symptoms of the poisoning include elevated heart rate, blood pressure, anxiety, vomiting, and in some cases psychosis, possibly necessitating hospitalization. I'd say mission accomplished. You got high, okay? You were irresponsible. You took too much. You got high. It's not poison. You didn't poison yourself. All right, you just got too high. Be an adult about it. It's ridiculous. There are medical conditions where if you smoke too much, you can start throwing up, and that's an issue you need to cut back. But this is irresponsible at its best. Canadian medical professionals are moving away from the term cannabis overdose because of the close association with the critical drug overdose causing death. Health Canada doesn't list death as a direct result of overconsumption of cannabis. The actual effect is something more akin to alcohol poisoning, where the user has an adverse reaction to consuming too much. One name gaining popularity is green out, in which someone gets sick after smoking or eating. The director of the Cannabis Poison Control Center says that the jump in local cases of cannabis poisoning were significant enough to file a report with the Department of Public Health. Right now, it's hard to distinguish whether there's more exposure, more cases of overintoxication, or simply more people calling because they feel more comfortable now that it's legal. Even if the majority of reported cases don't require a visit to the hospital, the center is staying in touch with public health across Quebec to keep an eye on the situation. The center recommends seeking immediate medical condition in case of an overdose, especially if experiencing chest pain, panic attacks, loss of contact with reality, or seizures. You'd also take a hot shower, drink some water. With the wave of legalization, we're trying to figure out the right amount of edibles, trying to give exact expectations, what that experience might be. And dealing with a lot of new things like banking. With so many new states going legal and countries going legal, we're dealing with a new wave of issues like edibles and hospitals, how insurance is going to cover that, how you're able to pay for it, if banking is even an option for you. Right now in the US, banking isn't an option, and that's why all of these companies are going into Canada. And Puerto Rico is no different, being a U.S. territory. So right now, Puerto Rico has a medical marijuana with companies that aren't able to do banking. So Puerto Rico's medical marijuana companies have lost their only banking solution, forcing them to conduct business in cash. So 2 Co-op is an in-state credit union. They've been providing banking for medical marijuana firms as part of the cooperative sector, which is regulated by local authorities, the Caribbean Business reported. So an executive director for 2 Co-op was unavailable to comment, but the marijuana companies are now unable to carry out electronic payments, which are required by the Treasury Department. So this will also make it difficult for marijuana businesses, medical marijuana businesses in Puerto Rico to pay sales and use taxes. So here's what you need to know. One of Puerto Rico's cannabis attorneys said that it's unclear if state institutions, including the Municipal Revenue Collection Center, will take cash payments. The lack of banking solutions could also create a crime risk for medical marijuana businesses that are moving and storing large amounts of cash. And Puerto Rico's medical marijuana market may have more than 90 cannabis businesses, including more than 50 dispensaries, that have been doing robust commerce despite setbacks from the devastating Hurricane Maria in 2017. So without the ability to bank, you have other issues like predatory lending. So I get a lot of spam. I get people that want to ask me if I want to file an IPO in Canada, if I need lending, but it's very dangerous. You have to be careful about the repayment schedules, the interest. It's predatory. Predatory loans typically involve a lender who relies on unfair or misleading tactics to entice a borrower to sign for a loan with a huge interest rate or other terms that are bad for the borrower. So cannabis companies are especially vulnerable since most traditional lenders are reluctant to serve cannabis companies because the plant is illegal under federal law. So the situation has prompted cannabis entrepreneurs to seek out alternative forms of financing, which includes, unfortunately, predatory lenders who can charge interest rates as much as 20% or more. So this has happened for a few times within the industry. So if you're unaware about lending or loans, hire an expert so that they can recognize predatory lending and predatory lenders. They can do their due diligence, reading the fine print, or just deciding or advising that you walk away. Hopefully some of this will change as the future moves on and laws pass, like having the House Financial Services Committee finally making cannabis banking a thing, hopefully, and we'll see. There's a Democratic majority in the U.S. House with a movement to push a cannabis bill, which is in committee. So the first sign of a more receptive Congress in 2019 will come when the House Financial Services Committee takes up a draft of this Safe Banking Act. The bill, sponsored by a Democrat from Colorado and a Democrat from Washington, would allow banks and credit unions to work freely with state legal cannabis businesses, even as the plant remains illegal on the federal level. On the surface, the goal is twofold: to facilitate business development in the industry and allow regulators to clear a significant hurdle en route to a broader cannabis reform legislation. The byproducts of legitimate banking options in the cannabis sector include far-reaching benefits for other areas of the U.S. economy that have been eyeing the early growth of cannabis businesses. A fully banked marketplace would allow regulators to determine the actual size of the market. It will ultimately be a springboard for the Treasury Department to issue updated guidelines over and above the FinCEN guidance that's out there now, which is very draconian. So as the U.S. decides whether or not they want to allow banking for cannabis businesses, Canada just continues to move right along. Cannabis stocks are mixed as Canada says legalization hasn't led to expected spike in consumption. So data shows that the number of Canadians using cannabis has barely changed since the full adult recreation and legalization of last year. The news comes as investors in the U.S. digest a widening crackdown on CBD, the non-psychoactive ingredient in cannabis that's widely held to have wellness benefits. CBD has been a popular additive in drinks, food, and even cosmetics, thanks to a claim it can alleviate disorders such as anxiety and depression. So what should you expect from cannabis stocks this earnings season? For investors in cannabis stocks, this earnings season will be extra special. It'll be the first quarter since Canada legalized adult use marijuana, and the results will allow investors to get at least some idea whether legalization is living up to the hype that preceded it. In general, Canadian LPs, including Tilray and Kronos Group, haven't hinted at profitability, said Alan Brockstein, founder of the New Cannabis Venture and author of the 420 Investor. The Cannabis Exchange Traded Fund, or ETF, called ETFMG Alternative Harvest, just reached an exclusive exchange traded fund club of $1 billion mark. So MJ is the only pure play cannabis ETF trading in the US, recently topped the $1 billion mark in assets under management. So it's just been over 2 years since MJ was converted into a marijuana ETF from a fund that previously provided exposure to Latin American real estate investment. So for the last 2 years, MJ is up more than 50% and more than double the returns of the S&P over the same time frame. MJ tracks the Prime Alternative Harvest Index and is up more than 49% year to date. And in what should not come as a surprise at all, Canadian cannabis producer Flower announces a NASDAQ application. I feel like I've kind of been prepping you for this the entire podcast. There's a Canadian cannabis producer, the Flower Corporation, announced that it would submit an application to be listed on the NASDAQ. So in addition to the application, Flower announced its filing to form 40F registration statement with the Securities and Exchange Commission. The NASDAQ listing has the potential to make Flower stock more accessible and attractive to a broader group of investors. U.S. market and Flower also align concerning shares values. It's also a market that's known for a home for innovation, global companies, and that align with what we have built so far. Canopy Growth to expand investment in the U.S. hemp industry. Less than a month after securing a hemp license in the state of New York and announcing an initial investment between 100 and 150 million, Canopy Growth said it plans to expand into other states and increase its financial commitment. Last year, Canopy Growth secured a $4 billion investment from Constellation Brands. Both companies are committed to developing a cannabis-infused beverage. The company will focus on states with big populations and progressive leadership who want to have hemp become part of their actual job creation and industry platform. Maybe they should consider Oregon. It's producing twice as much cannabis as people are using. Pretty sure they have some extra hemp as well. But Oregon is producing twice as much cannabis as people are using, according to a new study from the Oregon Liquor Control Commission. Oregon has been overproducing cannabis for a while, leaving more than 6 years' worth of supply sitting on the shelves and at farms. The oversupply of cannabis has driven down prices. Since recreational cannabis was legalized 3 years ago, prices have dropped from $10 a gram to less than $5 a gram retail. That may be good for consumers, but they worry about weak regulations plus a massive oversupply that'll fuel the black market. And some local news in Washington, the lack of cannabis tracking data sparks confusion and missed business opportunities. Comprehensive price and sales data and incorrect figures about marijuana commerce have sowed confusion among cannabis businesses in Washington state since regulators rolled out a new traceability system more than a year ago. Cannabis analytics companies that have long relied on the data have watched their revenue shrink. Also, the lack of market transparency has put a damper on investments by marijuana entrepreneurs. Industry officials said that the situation will improve in coming months as Washington State's new traceability system, operated by Denver-based Marijuana Freeway, MJ Freeway, gets fully up to speed. An MJ Freeway spokesperson said once the system is fully implemented, more data will be made available. In the meantime, these issues have surfaced. There's a detailed sales transaction, such as the price program of flower sales and how much retailers are paying for the product, have been unavailable. Some blame the state's implementation of its new marijuana traceability system, saying it's unable to perform key functions. The lack of data has made it hard for cannabis companies to make informed decisions, according to industry watchers. For example, growers previously used the data to help price their wholesale flower, and retailers use it to find deals on infused products. Analytics companies are losing sales because they've relied on the data to advise company clients. Jim McCrae, owner of cannabis-focused business intelligence Straight Firm Analytics in Seattle, said that 60% of his consulting fees were tied into the state's traceability data. A core part of his services was informing clients which Washington State retailer was paying the most for a given product and who was paying the least. That's just gone away, he said. I really feel a sense of loss. Another issue involves the fact that the state provided monthly sales reports, which have resulted in wildly incorrect figures, according to industry watchers. For example, in June of 2018, one Seattle-based producer-processor, Prohibition Gold, was shown to have tallied $8.6 million in sales. By contrast, the months before and after, the company averaged $70,000 to $100,000 in sales. We would have loved to make $8.5 million in June, but that certainly didn't happen, said Greg Walters, the company's managing partner. From a historical perspective, the Florida-based BioTrack THC was given the CDCL traceability system provider from the start of the state's legal recreational cannabis program in 2014 until October 31st of 2017. During that period, the state provided a monthly sales dump of cannabis business transactions throughout the supply chain. So the information included the weight and dollar amount of each sale from a grower to an oil producer, detailed amount of each retail transaction, plant count from suppliers, quality assurance and potency results. David Busby, CEO of Seattle-based data software company VTracker, said he was paid a consultancy fee several times to evaluate the previous traceability data and determine that the viability of a deal for a client. Another group that is disserviced by the lack of data here is all of the people who want to make investments into the industry, Busby said, and people who want to continue their investments. One potential investor showed interest in setting up a cannabis transport business, but eventually balked. Among other things, the investor cited the lack of detailed 2018 business data, according to Busby. But the data stopped coming as of November 1st, 2017. Since then, the Washington State Liquor and Cannabis Board has provided only total sales figures, which the businesses and the sales offer to the state. So how do cannabis businesses stay in compliant when the state can't do it? Here's 5 tips to help your cannabis dispensaries stay in compliance. While regulations around cannabis retail and cannabis are still being ironed out, we do know one thing: the industry is booming, according to the Cannabis Economic Account. In 2017, about 4.9 million Canadians aged 15 to 64 spent an estimated $5.7 billion on cannabis for medical and non-medical purpose. This was equivalent to around $1,200 per cannabis consumer. Clearly, there are a lot of opportunities in the cannabis space, and because of this, we can expect more and more businesses to enter the market. If you're thinking about doing just that, one of the things you should focus on is compliance. So in this article, they're going to outline key steps that you should take to ensure that your marijuana dispensary stays on the right side of the law and operates within the safe and community standards. 1, stay updated every step of the way. Be proactive when keeping up with the compliance news and updates. Official regulations may not be out yet, so don't wait until they're finalized before you take the necessary steps to comply. 2, employ and network with the right people. Try to stay on top of all things compliant can be tough, particularly in the cannabis industry. Regulations and guidelines are always in review and evolving, so the key to keeping everything in check is to work with the right people. 3 is to use the right solutions. Cannabis dispensaries are very unique requirements, so it's best to work with vendors and solutions providers who specialize in the cannabis industry. These vendors are always up to date with industry and regulatory developments, so they can tailor their solutions to see that you're able to adhere to regulations. Audit and check your operations. Once you start operating your cannabis dispensary, it's essential that you routinely conduct retail audits, that your business stays compliant with all the necessary regulations. And finally, err on the side of caution. When it comes to compliance, it's always best to err on the side of caution. Better to make less and stay in business than to take the risk that might pay double today, only to lead to a loss of licensing or worry tomorrow. So at the end of the day, compliance is what matters. Keeping the people safe, that should be at the top of the priority of every cannabis retailer. And with that, we're going to roll this one up. I'm Josh Kincaid. This is the Talking Hedge, and I'm out.